and he rented out a fourth pew. He'd rented 4 pews. He's paying money. He says, listen, will you come and sit in my pew? I'm paying for this pew. I want you to sit in my pew. And as he sat there, he says, there's got to be more to this than what I'm doing. They had started a Sunday school, and so he went to the Sunday school director, and he said, listen, I'd like to help in Sunday school. And they said, you know what, Dwight, we appreciate that. Man, that's a great idea. The problem is we've got as many teachers as we've got students. We really don't need any more helpers. We need more students. So he said, well, I can do that. So he started going out to the German and the Scandinavian immigrants, and he would invite them to come to church. But one of the things that he found is he could attract the children a whole lot better than he could attract the adults. And so he began to take candy and a pony out into these areas, and he began to attract children to come to the Sunday school. Well, this Sunday school was growing so large that they said, listen, Dwight, you teach these kids yourself. And so he got him an old box car on a train, and he opened that up, and he had his Sunday school in there. But they outgrew that. And so he went and he rented a saloon. On Saturday night, they would carouse and drink and do whatever they do in the saloon. You know, some of you know. And then on Sunday, early Sunday morning, he'd go in, he'd clean it all up, and they'd have Bible study for children in there. It grew to 1,500 children. They called him Crazy Moody. You can understand why, can't you? 1,500 children, that'll make you crazy. But he's out there, and he's winning people to Jesus. And yet, that really, to be honest, really wasn't his passion. His passion was to be a businessman. His passion was to be a millionaire. And so he left Boston, and he went to Chicago with the heart's desire to make money. When he was over there, he started going to church. He started doing those same kinds of things, and God began to bless him and increase his ministry. And he came to the place that he realized, listen, God's got a bigger call on my life than just selling shoes. He was making $5,000 a year. He had saved $7,000. He decided, I'm walking away from this career. At the age of 23, he quit and said, I'm going into the ministry full time. He began to continue to do the Sunday school work, reaching kids all over the city of Chicago. I mean, kids were just drawing in by the masses. And then he said, we have to have a place to continue to train them. And so he started a church. He raised some money, and he built the Illinois Street Church. And they began to meet in this church. He wasn't a preacher, but he said, I'll preach on Sunday nights until we can get a preacher. And so on Sunday nights, he would preach, and then he would find people to come in and preach on Sunday mornings. Well, the church began to grow, and the church began to grow. And as the church began to grow, he added more ministries, and he added more things. And then he started preaching more, and he called in more people. Well, eventually, he said, he went over to England. When he was over in England, somebody invited him to come over, and they said, would you preach for us? He said, well, I'm not a preacher, but I'll come. And so he went over to England, and when he got there, the 2 people that had asked him to come had died on his way there. And so he got there, and what are we supposed to do now? So they held a couple of meetings and just a few people. But then F.B. Meyer invited him to preach in an open-air meeting. And at that meeting, 100 people got saved. And people began to hear about that, and so crowds began to flock. And then there were 200 people and 500 people and 1,500 people that were being saved. And he was preaching to hundreds of thousands of people. And then after 2 years, he made his way back to Chicago. And by the time he got back to Chicago, his fame had already spread. And so other people in the States asked him, will you come and preach to us? And so he began to go and began to preach to thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people. The buildings couldn't hold the number of people that he was preaching to. And thousands of people were being won to Jesus. In order to train these people, he started a Bible college, bears his name today, called Moody Bible College. The church began to grow, and he built that church up. And that church still stands today. It's called Moody Bible Church. Edward Lutzer is preaching on the radio today. One of the things that he did is he used media, going out to take Bible study books to people on a covered wagon in the back so that people could learn. He started a publishing house. That's still around today. It's called Moody Bible Publishers, a name you can trust. You can still buy books from them today. He went out and he says, we want to send out letters and correspondence, and that grew into a radio station that is heard around the world called Moody Bible Radio. And here this little boy, 5 years old, wasn't grown up in any kind of stable home, worked on a farm, had no education, and yet God changed the world through him and continues to change the world. They said at his death, they estimated that 1 million people had come to know Jesus through the ministry and preaching of Dwight Lyman Moody. And here's what he said. He said, if this world is going to be reached, I am convinced that it must be done by men and women of average talent. If this world is going to be reached, I am convinced that it must be won by people of average talent. Any average folks in here today? Would you allow God to take the many that you have and turn it into something mighty? We're going to have an invitation in just a moment, the opportunity for you to respond. And I'm going to ask you to surrender today. There's some of you in here today, and you say, well, I've already surrendered my life. Well, what is it that you have that God could use to bring glory to Him? What little thing do you have that if you would give it to God, that God could make it mighty in His hand? For some of you, you say, I don't have a whole bunch of money. God says, well, give me what you have. For some of you say, I don't have a whole lot of time. Give me what you have. I don't have a whole lot of talent. Give me what you have. What will you surrender today that God would use it? Some of you, you've got some hurts in here today. And God says, would you surrender that? Some of you are holding on to some rights, and God says, I want you to yield those rights today. What will you surrender today into the hands of God, however little, however small it may be, that He might make something mighty out of it? And here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Just like in the days of the Old Testament, when they would come to the temple, they would bring that sacrifice, and they would lay it on the altar, and they would give it to God. Now, I believe if you're listening today, God's tapping upon your heart, and He's saying, this is what I want you to lay down. This is what I want you to sacrifice to me. And in just a moment when we stand to sing, I'm going to ask you if you would get up from where you are, if you'd walk to this altar, and I'm going to ask you if you would take that and plant it here before the Lord. Just as though you've got a seed and you bring it here and you say, God, this is what I've got. It's not much. It's not a whole lot. I give you what I got, and I plant it right here on the altar, and I ask you, Father, to make it grow into something mighty. I give it to you. You got that? You understand? What will you give today? I will not offer to the Lord that which costs me nothing. Now, there's some of you here today, and God wants your life. He wants you to be forgiven, and He wants you to be saved. And you say, you don't understand. I've got my life planned out. I've got things that I want to do. Can I just be honest with you? There's 6 billion people on the planet today. We probably add up the people who have come before us. Probably been somewhere in the area of 60 billion people who have crossed through this world and walked upon this dirt ball called earth. The vast majority of them you've never heard of. Just little, insignificant people the world never knows. They're buried in cemeteries all around the world. They've made a difference somewhere. If we would just be honest, God will just use average people just like you. If you'll just lay your life down and let Him have it. So what does that mean? That means you admit to God, God, I'm a nothing. I'm a nothing because I've chosen my way over your way. I've sinned. And I've messed up what you gave me to begin with. But God, I believe Jesus died on the cross to be punished for what I did wrong. And His punishment allows me to go free. And so, God, today, I make the choice to surrender my life to you. I'll do what you want me to do. I'll be who you want me to be. I surrender my life to you. That's what God wants you to lay down today. I'm going to pray a prayer this morning just to help you to do just that. It's called the sinner's prayer. As I pray this prayer, if you listen, you say, that's what I want to do, then I'm going to ask you to tell it back to God just as you're sitting there talking to Him. So would you close your eyes and bow your heads with me? And would you say to God, God, I am a sinner. I deserve to go to hell because I've disobeyed you. I believe Jesus died for me.